General Hospital will reveal interesting developments for the week of March 31st to April 4th, 2025. First, in the frigid air of Toronto. A deadly game between Jason and Sunny against the elusive Saliski reached its boiling point. For weeks, they had navigated a web of underground informants, coded messages, and dangerous allies to locate their target. Saliski, a seasoned mercenary with deep connections to criminal networks, had managed to stay one step ahead, using every resource at his disposal to escape justice. But his luck had finally run out. In a rare moment of overconfidence, Saliski underestimated Jason's instincts and walked straight into a carefully planned trap. The confrontation was brutal and brief. A single miscalculation cost him everything. Mortally wounded, he collapsed before he could utter the name of the powerful client who had hired him. Despite the setback, Sunny refused to accept defeat. The lack of a confession from Saliski was a blow. But it wasn't the end. Years of navigating the shadows had taught Sunny that even in death, a man like Saliski left behind traces, an encrypted hard drive, a burner phone filled with deleted messages, a hidden bank account with suspicious transactions. Every clue was a thread in a much larger web, and Sunny was determined to untangle it. He and Jason split up, each taking on different angles of the investigation, determined to trace the chain of command and expose whoever had orchestrated the chaos. The mission in Toronto might be over, but the war was far from finished. As their work in Canada began to wrap up, thoughts turned back to Port Charles, where life continued to move forward. There was a sense of urgency to return, not just to resume their personal lives, but to keep an eye on the growing threats back home. Jason, ever stoic, felt the pull of familiar streets and unfinished business. For Sunny, however, the return held a different significance. He had made a promise to attend an important event in Monica's honor. And even amid the chaos of the mission, he intended to keep his word. The legacy of those who gave their lives to serve others mattered to him more than most would ever know. Back in Port Charles, the hospital buzzed with anticipation as preparations were finalized for the grand opening of the new cardiac care wing named after Monica. Staff members polished the floors. Floral arrangements were carefully placed, and a sense of reverence hung in the air. Monica's contributions had spanned decades, her leadership, compassion, and unwavering commitment to her patients had shaped the hospital into what it was today. The ceremony was not just a celebration of medical advancement, but a tribute to a woman who had become the heart of General Hospital. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered in admiration, ready to honor her remarkable journey. Laura stood before the crowd with a quiet grace, her voice steady as she began her speech. She spoke of Monica not just as a doctor, but as a pillar of strength through times of crisis. A mentor to many, and a symbol of endurance within a town that had seen its share of turmoil. Her words painted a portrait of a woman who had faced personal tragedy yet never wavered in her devotion to healing others. As the applause echoed through the hall, there was a collective sense of pride and gratitude. Even as dark forces moved silently elsewhere, for this moment, Port Charles stood united, celebrating a legacy of hope, resilience, and unwavering service. Second, the inauguration of the new Cardiac Care Center will coincide with the show's 62nd anniversary episode airing on Tuesday, April 1st, making it a must-watch event for longtime fans. As the milestone celebration unfolds, a flood of familiar faces will return to General Hospital to honor the profound legacy of Monica. This event is not only a tribute to her decades of service but also a reminder of the community she helped build and the lives she touched along the way. The atmosphere will be filled with nostalgia and appreciation, as the hospital pays homage to a woman whose presence shaped its very foundation. Amidst the uplifting energy of the celebration, a darker storyline will unfold that threatens to overshadow the day's joyous tone. Christina, caught in a moment of misguided anger and confusion, will find herself at the center of a tragic mistake. Her plan to sabotage Ava's car as an act of revenge will go terribly wrong, resulting in a devastating crash. The repercussions will be swift and shocking, rippling through the town and drawing attention away from the festivities. The juxtaposition of a day meant to celebrate healing and life with a moment of destruction adds a deeply emotional layer to the episode. Christina will be paralyzed with disbelief when she arrives at the scene, only to watch as paramedics struggle to extract Rick and Elizabeth from the wreckage. The chaotic flashes of emergency lights, the screams, the crushed metal, it will all blur together in a haze of guilt and horror. She never imagined that her impulsive actions would harm anyone she cared about, let alone lead to such a catastrophic outcome. Her face will register both panic and denial as she pieces together the consequences of her choices in real time. In the aftermath, the truth will come crashing down on Christina with an unbearable weight. Her heart will sink as she realizes that the brake line she tampered with belonged not to Ava's vehicle, but to Rick's. The realization will not only shatter her emotionally, but also leave her fearing the damage she may have done to the already fragile relationships in her life. Rick, her father figure, and Elizabeth, a respected nurse and friend, became unintended casualties in a moment of misguided vengeance. The fallout will be personal and far-reaching. As the celebrations for Monica's accomplishments continue at General Hospital, there will be a quiet undercurrent of dread. While speeches are made and lives are honored, another life-altering event will be unfolding elsewhere in Port Charles. Christina's crisis will not be one easily swept aside, it will demand accountability, forgiveness, and a reckoning with her own pain. This convergence of triumph and tragedy will serve as a poignant reminder that in Port Charles, even the brightest moments are never without their shadows. Third, as the weight of her actions begins to suffocate her, Christina finds herself spiraling, caught between the devastating truth and the unbearable guilt that clings to her every breath. The accident, now headline news in Port Charles, has not only endangered lives but also threatened to unravel the delicate balance she's tried so hard to restore within her family. Each moment since the crash has become a waking nightmare, and with every glance at Rick and Elizabeth's names in the hospital's critical care log, her conscience grows louder, more relentless. The secret festers within her, a shadow she can't escape, one that follows her into every quiet corner and sleepless night. The impulse to confess haunts her. Yet that instinct falters the moment she sees Molly, fragile, heartbroken, and overwhelmed by fear for Rick's life. The sight of her sister, barely holding herself together in the hospital corridor, pierces Christina's resolve. Molly, unaware of the truth, rushes into Christina's arms, seeking comfort and stability. In that embrace, something inside Christina fractures. The depth of her mistake becomes even clearer, and so too does the risk. The bond with Molly, already strained by past disagreements, could be destroyed beyond repair if the truth were to come out. Christina clings to her sister, knowing that silence might be the only way to preserve what little they have left. Her internal struggle intensifies. Torn between the moral obligation to confess and the fear of losing everything she holds dear. The silence becomes a prison, and yet a protective shield. She tells herself it was an accident, that she never meant to hurt Rick, that she only wanted Ava to face consequences. But even those justifications can't dull the sting of what she's done. Every time Molly looks at her with love and trust, it feels like a knife twisting deeper. She knows the truth has the power to not only ruin her relationship with Molly, but also irreparably harm the family's fragile unity. In the midst of this emotional whirlwind, Lucky enters the picture. Now back in Port Charles and investigating the incident. His instincts lead him straight to Christina. He sees through her shaken demeanor and carefully measured words. When he questions her, his tone is gentle but persistent, drawing on years of experience with both criminals and victims. Christina feels the pressure mount. Unlike Molly, Lucky carries a kind of authority that demands honesty. And his concern is rooted in a complicated family history that she cannot ignore. Standing before him, Christina is forced to decide, protect herself and her sister from the truth, or trust Lucky with the burden she can no longer carry alone. That moment of confrontation becomes a quiet turning point. Though she may still hesitate to come clean publicly, Christina might find the courage to tell Lucky in confidence, hoping he can guide her through the aftermath without destroying her world. It is a fragile, dangerous line she walks, one between confession and concealment, love and loss. And as the days pass, with Rick's fate uncertain and guilt gnawing at her soul, Christina must face the reality that silence, too, can be a form of betrayal. Fourth, in the days following the crash, Christina will find herself trapped in a maelstrom of guilt and fear, struggling to comprehend the consequences of her irreversible mistake. Every waking moment will be consumed by the image of Rick and Elizabeth being pulled from the twisted wreckage, an image that replays in her mind like a punishment she cannot escape. The realization that she was responsible, however unintentionally, will weigh heavily on her conscience, but confessing the truth may cost her more than she can bear. As she wrestles with the urge to come clean, her thoughts will drift to Molly, the sister she's only just begun to rebuild a fragile connection with. The emotional turmoil intensifies when Christina witnesses the depth of Molly's grief. Seeing her sister collapse in despair, lost in uncertainty over Rick's condition, will strike a devastating chord. Christina will be flooded with shame as she watches Molly, completely unaware of the truth, reach for her in desperation. In that vulnerable moment, Molly might throw herself into Christina's arms, seeking the kind of comfort only a sister could provide. But Christina, frozen in place, will struggle to respond, her regret rising like a tide threatening to swallow her whole. The fear that any confession would destroy what little remains of their relationship could ultimately silence her. Torn between doing what's right and protecting the bond she has with her family, Christina may decide to keep the truth hidden. The idea of losing Molly forever, of becoming the person responsible for ruining everything, will haunt her. Still, that silence may not last indefinitely. When Lucky begins to ask questions, sensing inconsistencies in Christina's story and demeanor, she may finally open up, at least to him. There is a long-standing history between them, and something in his steady, watchful gaze may break through her defenses. The burden of guilt might push her to confide in Lucky, if only to unburden the secret before it consumes her entirely. Meanwhile, Lucky will be facing a whirlwind of his own emotions. As he waits for updates on Elizabeth's condition, he'll be forced to confront the fragility of life and the deep, unresolved feelings he still harbors for her. Although both Liz and Rick sustained injuries in the crash, early reports suggest that Rick's situation is far more serious. The uncertainty will hang over everyone like a storm cloud, with Lucky oscillating between helplessness and quiet rage as he seeks justice while praying for recovery. The possibility that someone tampered with the vehicle won't be far from his mind, and it will only intensify his need for answers. As Molly leans on her family for strength, she'll also find unexpected solace in Cody. Through quiet gestures and steady presence, Cody will emerge as a calming force amid the chaos. He'll offer Molly a shoulder to cry on, someone who listens without judgment and helps her feel less alone in the darkest hours. Their growing closeness, forged through shared pain and uncertainty, may lay the foundation for something deeper. In the midst of heartbreak and trauma, a spark will begin to form, subtle, tentative, but undeniable. What began as friendship may evolve into a tender romance, offering Molly a sliver of hope in the face of overwhelming loss. Fifth, tensions are set to rise at General Hospital as Drew begins to confront a series of crushing disappointments that shake his confidence and his alliances. Still reeling from recent events, Drew will find himself enraged when he learns that the Quartermain family mausoleum remains intact, despite previous assurances that it would be quietly demolished. This failure sets off alarm bells, leading Drew to believe that Ezra may have betrayed him. The trust he had carefully placed in Ezra begins to crumble, and with it, Drew's temper flares. Convinced that someone has deliberately stalled his plans, Drew starts pointing fingers, unable to ignore the growing list of complications tied to his vision for the property. His frustrations only deepen during an explosive confrontation with Curtis. Once close allies with a shared sense of purpose, Drew and Curtis will find themselves on opposing sides, each accusing the other of manipulation and dishonesty. Their disagreement becomes increasingly personal, escalating with every exchanged word. While both men are driven by ambition and pride, neither is willing to admit fault. What began as a professional dispute quickly spirals into a volatile feud, threatening not only their business partnership but also the fragile balance of their mutual relationships. The fallout from their clash ripples through their circles, straining loyalties and casting doubt over future collaborations. Caught in the crossfire of Drew and Curtis's conflict is the budding romance between Kai and Trina. What was meant to be a time of discovery and joy for the young couple now hangs under a cloud of tension. The hostility between their respective mentors and father figures begins to seep into their time together. Conversations once light-hearted now turn cautious, with Trina growing increasingly aware of the hidden motives behind the smiles. Despite Kai's attempts to keep the drama at bay, it becomes clear that outside forces are beginning to encroach on their connection, threatening to disrupt the fragile tranquility they've found in one another. Trina's instincts won't allow her to stay silent for long. She begins to voice her concerns over Drew's recent proposal to Kai, a grand gesture masked as generosity. Though Drew claims he's willing to fund the surgeries and treatments necessary for Kai's return to soccer, Trina sees something far more complicated behind the offer. She begins to suspect that Drew's motivations may be self-serving, or worse, manipulative. Kai's future is on the line, and Trina fears that accepting Drew's help may come with strings they can't yet see. Her voice becomes one of reason and caution as she urges Kai to think carefully before accepting anything. As tensions continue to build, Trina finds herself in the difficult position of protecting both her relationship and Kai's future. Drew, once considered a trustworthy figure in their lives, is now under scrutiny. His growing list of missteps, emotional outbursts, and fractured partnerships paints a picture of a man unraveling under pressure. While he may believe his actions come from a place of support, those closest to him are beginning to question his true intentions. And in the center of it all, Trina stands firm, unwilling to let Kai's dreams be used as collateral in someone else's power play. Finally, after Carly agreed to a delicate arrangement with Brennan, she quickly turned her focus to Jason, knowing full well that the tension between them was far from resolved. Jason's disapproval of her involvement with Brennan lingered in every conversation, and although Carly understood his concerns, she was determined to prevent open hostility from brewing between the two men who meant the most to her. In her view, maintaining peace was essential, not only for her personal life but also for the stability of everything they were all working toward. The time had come for a crucial and honest discussion between Jason and Carly, one that would determine whether their bond could withstand the pressure of diverging paths. In the midst of this emotional balancing act, Sasha stepped forward with her own matter of the heart. She and Jason shared a private moment as she brought up the topic of the child, whether her own or one connected to a larger plan, and expressed a desire to ensure they were on the same page. Their conversation was thoughtful and grounded in mutual respect, revealing a layer of tenderness that neither had fully acknowledged until now. As they spoke about responsibility, trust, and the future, the bond between them subtly deepened. It was the kind of moment that marked the beginning of something new, allowing the possibility of love to quietly take root between two people who had both endured profound loss. Meanwhile, as Sunny enjoyed a quiet dinner with Laura, Maxie took it upon herself to nudge Lucas toward the possibility of something exciting. Maxie, ever the enthusiastic matchmaker, believed that Marco could be exactly what Lucas needed, and her timing couldn't have been better. Marco was on his way to Port Charles, potentially to meet with Diane for a position at the legal firm she shared with Alexis. If things went well, Marco would have a solid reason to stay in town, offering a natural opportunity for him and Lucas to cross paths more often. The potential for a romantic storyline began to simmer just beneath the surface, and Maxie was ready to fan the flames. However, Marco's arrival would also stir up trouble beyond the realm of love and law. With his lineage tracing back to Jens Sidwell and Natalia Ramirez, he carried with him the weight of a legacy steeped in darkness and unresolved tension. Natalia and Sidwell were already in the midst of a volatile disagreement, and Marco's presence in Port Charles could ignite the fuse of that family conflict. His visit to Windermere suggested ulterior motives, and it became increasingly clear that Marco's charm masked a more complex nature, one that may echo the more dangerous traits of his father. His true intentions remained a mystery, and the role he would play in the chaos to come had yet to unfold. Elsewhere, Jocelyn was making bold moves of her own, stepping away from the strict training regimen of the WSB. She chose to spend more time with Vaughn, a decision that brought both risk and emotional clarity. As she neared the final trials of her program, Jocelyn knew that her fate was almost sealed. Whether she would officially join the ranks of the WSB or walk away would depend on how she faced her last test. At the same time, Ava was gathering intelligence that could send shockwaves through Port Charles. When she discovered that Rick's car had been sabotaged, and noticed its placement in her designated parking spot, she began to suspect something far more personal. With a sharp eye and a long memory, Ava began to piece together Christina's potential motive. And what she found could unravel secrets far more dangerous than anyone expected.